What's his move? 20?
15. Donna's a small character in heavy armor.
Wow, that's slow.
Yeah, he's not a dwarf.
I hate that power.
You hate the dwarf power to move at the same speed as a human if they both wear heavy armor.
Hate that power.
Game night is the best night of the week. When your friends show up, the snacks come out, and it's time to slay some monsters. But it can also become a source of stress and conflict. Or, in the worst case, it can turn into the NERF Wars. Please click like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. After a series of encounters with sinister outsiders, creatures that do not belong on this plane of reality, our heroes have been sent by Dom Harad, the ruler of Iberia del Fair, to investigate a dwarf hold which had fallen out of contact, with the assistance of Sepathula, the sentient flying carpet who had forced them to adjust their wardrobe to meet its rigorous fashion standards. And so we flew on, silently through the night. You are roused by Sepathula, the carpet warning in a hushed voice. Something is approaching. I'm going to descend as quickly as possible. Yeah, the carpet wouldn't want to risk actually taking any damage. Actually, it's more concerned about you guys falling off. It's a long way down. You can barely make out some dark form descending from the night sky. It's too far away for dark vision, but it's a huge black silhouette, possibly sort of a bat-winged shape. Something of a guessing game ensued regarding the possible identity of the shadowy creature. Suggestions included a rock, an incredibly large predatory bird, or a Tyrannosaurus on a glider, Batman, Robin, or a space shuttle, though the last suggestion was discounted because, obviously, a descending shuttle's thermal tiles would glow red with luminous intensity. In actuality, Omit and Varian Seth were both pretty sure they knew what it was, simply by taking the known features, huge, dark, winged, our current character levels, an adjustment for GM's tendency to always choose higher challenge rating enemies, and comparing all that to their mental lists of the most obnoxious enemies in the core books. However, their prediction had little to no impact on their initial actions. I activate my ring of invisibility and fly off the carpet over here. I step off the carpet and drop down 100 feet. The enemy was out of range of most of the player character's abilities, particularly with the visibility limitations. Dark vision is usually only 60 feet, and without a good light source, low light vision is mostly useless. So all that the other members of the party can really do is ready actions against approach. The carpet under you is descending quite rapidly, but the large shape appears to fly even faster, descending, then matching speed a mere 180 feet above Sepathula. Varian, you are hit with a sharp spike of negative energy. Make a fortitude save. DC 21. Made it.
Okay, take 19 damage.
GM smiles sourly at Varian.
That's 3 times.
In a previous campaign, GM's creatures had cast Finger of Death, this same spell, at Varian's character on 2 separate occasions, with Varian managing to survive both despite only a 50% chance to succeed at those fortitude saves. This situation was a little different, however, since his current character, a master of psionics and member of the Elan race, had very powerful resources available to reduce the chances of failing such a critical saving throw. Nevertheless, flying solo had clearly made him a target, so he got his ass back on the carpet. Well, we know that it's Season Viz now.
This, combined with the Finger of Death spell, confirmed Varian and Omit's assumption that the monster was in fact a Nightwing, a very powerful, intelligent undead, difficult to harm, and possessing a vast array of potent spell-like abilities. The carpet had been flying so high that it took multiple rounds to land, despite descending at a rate of about 160 feet per 6-second combat round. There was a lot of tension among the players, not just in character. Though demonstrably faster than Sepathula, the Nightwing simply matched speed, keeping safely out of range while bombarding the heroes with first an area greater dispelling, cancelling some of the party's buff spells, and then an Unholy Blight spell to minimal effect. GM accidentally let slip that there were 3 smaller forms descending as well, forgetting that the party had no way to make them out from that far away. Then, the instant we landed, catching up with Omit, who had let himself fall, stopping himself with levitation just 10 feet off the ground, the Nightwing hit us with a confusion spell. Azeron, Balkoth, Omit, and even Donner, the NPC cleric, saved easily. But
Crap, I rolled a 3. DC 18 will save? No, I failed it by 1. I'll have to use the reroll from my luck blade. 3 again? Crap! And the greater dispelling took out my greater precognition buff, so I don't have the retroactive +4 to spend on it. I'm confused.
Varian Seth babbles incoherently. Balkoth, if you remember, he was stuck controlling the NPC cleric for that session, a task that he didn't like, but he took it seriously nonetheless. Balkoth looked frantically through the gnome's spell list, but unfortunately, that's one thing I forgot when building the gnome's stat block and spell list. Finding the NPC to be sadly devoid of countermeasures with which to unconfuse Varian, Balkoth gave up and had Donner try to blast the Nightwing with Searing Light, a potent anti-undead attack spell, particularly since Nightwings are weak against daylight. Unfortunately, we found out that the Hench Cleric, being 2 levels lower than the player characters, had almost no chance of affecting this powerful foe, which was actually 2 levels above the party according to its challenge rating. But that's when we were forced to wrap up for the night, meaning the encounter would continue in the next game session, after the obligatory interrogation phase, which our game master insists on inflicting upon the players every single time. First, as is tradition, we'll start off with some basic questions to learn about your character. Long ago, in one of these pre-game Inquisition periods, the Game Master had asked Omit about his character's goals. Normally, Omit's player is very strategic in what information he provides, but at that moment, he had not given his character's goal much thought, simply blurting out an answer in the hopes of moving on to, actually play D&D. But this stated goal, which he had hastily, jokingly announced, had been for his character to be able to reliably hit a target at his maximum bow range. At the time, Omit thought nothing of it, but GM clearly thought about it a lot. The player had accidentally drawn GM's attention to the possibility, and he now seemed to have calculated that for a man-sized, defenseless target, the tiefling archer was getting pretty close to that goal, to having a reasonable chance to hit such a target at 1,800 feet, despite the -20 penalty for maximum range. Only an okay chance to hit a defenseless armor class of 10 at that distance. Almost 20 points easier to hit than the foes we fight on a regular basis, but it appeared that our game master was concerned at the possible effects of Omit's long-distance accuracy combined with his highly optimized movement speed. This is only my speculation, but I think that idea must be what led to the following. Oh, there is one change that I wanted to implement regarding bonus movement. From now on, movement bonuses, such as from Boots of Speed, will be calculated after other multipliers like running, charging, etc. When characters charge, they spend their whole turn to move double their normal speed and still make a melee attack at the end. Whereas to run in D&D 3.5 means spending their entire turn to move at 4 times speed, while taking no other action and also suffering huge penalties to their defense, effectively leaving themselves vulnerable to move as fast as they possibly can. So preventing these magical speed bonuses from being multiplied would have a significant effect on the total distance certain characters can move in a combat round. Balkoth, who had no speed items or similar abilities, seemed unconcerned. Azeron looked somewhat distressed. His current character, Malavon, uses boots of striding and springing for plus 10 speed and cares a lot about mobility to keep out of enemies' reach while using her own reach weapon and psionic enlargement power to hit them back anyway. Omit appeared ashen-faced. He was the only player in the group who viewed the bonus movement from his boots of speed as being more valuable than the extra attack from that item. Varian looked lost in thought, or that's how he was trying to look as he glanced back and forth between Omit and Varian, waiting to see which player would explode first.
So my plus 30 speed won't multiply for the purposes of the charge and run actions?
And double move. Basically, you can only count the bonus once per turn, so it isn't getting multiplied. What about feats? Like, speed of thought? No, it won't affect feats. It also won't affect any class bonuses like monks or barbarians, or having a higher base movement from your race.
What about flight speed?
No, flight is a separate thing. These bonuses don't affect other movement types like flight, burrowing, or swim speed anyway, so they aren't affected. So basically, it just hoses people who bought speed boosting items. It primarily affects speed enhancing items and spells.
It just means he wants to attack us with hordes of spring attack monks.
What it actually means is that because most monsters have high base speed or fly speed, player characters simply cannot escape enemies. Ever.
Framing the change in that way drew a much greater reaction from Balkoth, because although he was personally unaffected, he wasn't going to outrun anything at his dwarven speed of 20. It suddenly felt like a matter of principle. Even Azeron, who had been looking at the change mostly from the narrower aspect of his reduction of combat mobility, appeared not to have considered the greater ramification that all battles were now, literally, to the death. We can cross that bridge when we get there. Anyway,
You just said that we can't. Considering that players move slower by default and our attempts to increase our speed don't compare to monsters' higher speed base.
Our speed items are not anywhere near worth it now.
I realize they aren't quite the same now, and I was going to give all items that enhance movement speed a 25% reduction in cost to compensate.
Huh, forget that. I'm getting a refund. I wouldn't have bought these boots of speed if they worked like that. It's not like it's a permanent bonus to move. It only works 10 rounds per day.
At this point, Omit excused himself from the room to steam about a change that negatively impacts his character number 734-02A, and presumably to restrain himself from shouting out NERF at the top of his lungs, or whatever it is Omit does when he loses his restraint. We don't know because he doesn't usually lose his restraint.
What was so wrong with movement that it needed to be neutered?
Jim doesn't like the thought of PCs getting away if his monsters are winning. I'm just looking ahead. There are some specific scenarios I'm very concerned about involving players with very high movement scores. Yeah, like PCs getting away.
This also lets his monsters get away from us. We'll have no way to chase him down now.
Look, not that many monsters are really fast.
Like that blue dragon that escaped us a while back. Or the Vrox or Glabrazu that chased us down. Or that thing we're fighting now.
The Glabrazu was using a potion of flight. Besides, not counting flyers.
If you look at the monsters around our level, almost everything either flies or has higher than 30 base movement just from being big.
GM had not expected such a strong reaction, and still wanted to run his game tonight. Oh, okay. Because of the significant resistance to the change, we'll have to re-examine it at a later date. But I still have some interrogation to do. Balkoth, what interesting fights do you remember?
I don't know.
So glad I have provided no interesting combats at all for you guys over the last year. Now, I think we can all agree that our characters live in interesting times.
I don't come here to answer all these questions.
Let me try it another way. What are some fights you remember where Balkoth personally turned the tide, where Another spellcaster like Varian could not have done it.
Ooh, what about the time we had to fight 2 powerful caster mobs on the astral plane?
You mean the place where all casters can cast an extra spell as a free action every round?
Well, yes, that is the place, but on the other hand, the area had subjective gravity, and we started 300 feet from the enemies.
400 feet away. I remember that one. Fighting was completely useless.
That one encounter is not representative. Though the players were quick to whip out that particularly egregious situation, they were also able to cite multiple battles where they had been saved by Balkoth's ability to weather the attacks from extremely deadly foes, or where they had faced enemies so magic resistant that Varian's destructive powers and Omit's scrolls and wands were entirely useless, and where it was primarily Balkoth's axe that saw them through. Eventually, a still unhappy-looking Omit returns to the game room.
So I'm getting a refund on my boots of speed, and
It's okay, man. GM walked it back. He's not making the change today. He's going to re-examine the issue later.
Yeah, you can still run away.
Omit still seems a little shaken up about the whole debacle, but we have to move on, continuing from where we left off in the battle started the previous week. Let's see, when we last left off, you were all doomed. Now, for this combat and this combat alone, Balkoth will continue to control the cleric.
Historical note from previous week presented for entirely objective reasons.
Okay, so for control of the cleric this week, somebody roll a d6. On a result of 1 through 6, control of the cleric goes to Balkoth.
Come on, man, I don't want to run him.
Wait, nothing happened last week. There was no combat, so it should be Omit's turn.
yeah, we only control him in combat while you roleplay for him, and there was no combat, so I didn't really have a turn.
As agreed upon, a different player gets the cleric each week.
First thing, I'll use my wand to dispel the confusion effect on Varian.
Wait, was it your turn?
It's a new round, and Omit's going on, initiative 38 or something.
You weren't planning to do this until you guys spent all last week discussing it. You were planning on letting the cleric dispel him because you thought the gnome had dispel memorized.
You're right, I did think the cleric might get it, which is why I didn't dispel last round. I waited, but the cleric didn't do it, because, as it turns out, he didn't have it memorized, which is why now I'm dispelling it.
Yeah, sure, of course. Anyway, you use your wand of dispel magic and Varian Seth is no longer confused.
I'm no longer confused.
The medium-sized shadows drop down here, here, and here, and the big monster drops down here and casts Cone of Cold.
As an immediate action, I cast my force field, protecting everyone in a 20-foot radius. That means not Omit.
We can't have Omit being on the battle map.
I'm technically on the map.
So, the 60-foot cone hits all you guys here. Does it get you, Omit?
Yep. Nope. 65 feet. 5 feet out of range.
That's excellent.
What? Let me see that. GM, who had only asked Omit as a hollow courtesy, recounts the map squares and curses silently to himself. It should be noted that GM does not take back his monster's movement, which now appears to have been slightly off, even though it could easily have landed 5 feet over and hit everyone with its damage spell. GM virtually never takes back any actions, even when he makes a mistake, whereas he's far more lenient with the player's takebacks if no more than one action has passed in between. And most of the time, he even gives players a skill check or other hint to change their mind if they decide to do something which their character should know to be stupid, like forgetting which energy types devils are immune to and wasting a high-level spell. Fine. Everybody else take 53 cold damage. Half if you make your reflex save.
Half again for the force field.
Right, so 1/4 if you do save. Then, it casts Darkness as a quickened spell.
That's the 20% miss chance.
20% if you can see in normal darkness. If you don't already have dark vision or a good light source, then it's 50% because you're attacking blind. Actually, the 3.5 version of darkness can't stop you from seeing. In fact, if you're stuck in total darkness and can't see anything, you can cast darkness and see again. It's darkness. It doesn't provide illumination. Sure it does. Check the spell description. It creates an area of shadowy illumination with 20% penalties to visibility regardless of vision modes. Let me read normal lights capable of brightening the area as are light spells with lower level. No, if you don't have dark vision or low light vision, you just can't see in it. Although certain that his interpretation of the spell is technically correct, Azeron accepts GM's ruling because he is the game master, and also because the spell is really stupid if it works the other way. But it pains Azeron to let it go, because casting darkness helps you see is one of his favorite D&D factoids. What transpires is a battle of mischances. Since the shadows are incorporeal, giving all attacks against them a 50% mischance, and the Nightwing can cast darkness at will, and even quicken that spell 3 times a day, adding a separate 20% mischance on top. Varian casts his new Oak Body power, which makes him immune to the strength drain ability of shadows, which could otherwise rapidly cripple him, though his movement is heavily reduced. Omit, with his recently restocked arrows, determines the hard way that the Nightwing's powerful damage reduction is only beaten by enchanted silver weapons. The Tiefling Archer has silver arrows, and various magical arrows, but has no arrows which are both. Balkoth determines that, likewise, his magic weapon isn't silver, and his silver weapon isn't magic. The dwarf deals more damage per hit than Omit, so the Nightwing is not immune to his strikes, but dealing minus 15 damage per hit does somewhat trivialize his attacks.
So the buff from the Cleric's Prayer spell adds to damage too, right?
Only weapon damage. Your spell damage won't be improved.
I think it'll be okay.
Varian tries to disintegrate the Nightwing, but fails due to the 1 in 5 mischance from darkness. Azeron levitates up out of the darkness spell and engages several shadows within his enlarged chain's reach. It quickly becomes obvious that their actual stats are no match for his character. It is merely a question of how long their incorporeal mischance can keep them alive. Alright, even it hits, odd it misses. Miss. Varian tries to disintegrate the Nightwing, but fails due to its spell resistance. At this point, the huge undead creature decides that Varian is the one to kill. Omit spends a charge from an extremely expensive wand to buff Balkoth's silver weapon, the spear end of his dwarven Urgosh, with the magic weapon spell cast at level 20. Balkoth begins chasing after the Nightwing, trying to stab it with his temporarily +5 weapon, with which he could actually deal full damage to it. Unwilling to risk being slain by the monster's full attack action, Varian flees like a little girl made of wood. Unfortunately, with his movement reduced by his Oak Body spell, he has to double move to get out of the Nightwing's massive reach, meaning he can take no useful actions in the same turn. In the process, though, Balkoth catches up and manages to get in one good round of +5 silver stabbing, enough for the Nightwing to take him seriously. It dispels the buff from his weapon, then goes back to chasing Varian.
That's it. I'm dropping Stampy.
Stampy's not gonna do any good against this thing.
What do you mean? It's an elephant. Tons of hit points. It hits for a big chunk of damage.
Wooden Varian continues to make like a leaf and run away, now trying to keep Stampy between him and the enemy. Unfortunately, the Nightwing is just as big as the elephant, but also has wings, and thus is easily able to get at him. Alright, I attack the 2 shadows again. Odd it hits, even it misses. Miss.
So, I knew that would happen when you called it different from last time.
Meanwhile, now that Balkoth knows Omit's caster level 20 wand of magic weapon exists, the dwarf relentlessly begs Omit to cast it again, so he can keep hitting for 20 damage instead of 2 damage. But Omit is very reluctant because those wand charges are hideously expensive, and the Nightshade will definitely just dispel it again. He's not being cheap though. Omit would think nothing about spending that money if he thought it would work. In fact, he is considering more desperate and expensive options.
How does this turning undead thing work again?
Well, somebody has to look up the needlessly complicated turn undead chart. It factors in the cleric's level, which is low since he's just a henchman, but his 5 ranks in knowledge religion give him a synergy bonus to balance that out a bit. Then he rolls turning damage, which is based on his charisma. His charisma of 10 gives him a very respectable +0 there.
0 charisma bonus is not respectable. What Donner needs is the old D&D arcade game version of turning. It just killed all the undead on the screen, cost nothing.
After we find the charts, the NPC cleric manages to channel the power of their sun god, Palor, to vaporize a single undead shadow, which is honestly better than we expected. Then Azeron attacks again.
Did you roll your 50% miss chance against the shadows?
Alright, this time on my d8, 5 through 8 is a hit.
Finally!
Hit! Omit spends another expensive wand charge to +5 Balkoth's silver spear tip. Having a magical silver weapon again, Balkoth beats on the Nightwing for respectable damage. Nightwing dispels the silver spear tip. Varian continues to run around the elephant in a Lovecraftian version of Duck Duck Goose, gradually being worn down by the 1 attack per round the Nightwing is getting against him. Donner, the NPC cleric, runs his stubby little legs off, trying his best to heal Varian.
What's his move? 20.
15. Donner's a small character in heavy armor.
Wow, that's slow.
Yeah, he's not a dwarf.
I hate that power. You hate the dwarf power to move at the same speed as a human if they both wear heavy armor. Hate that power.
Throughout all of this, Omit dispels the darkness, Nightwing recasts it. Lather, rinse, repeat. Omit dispels the darkness so many times that Nightwing runs out of quickened castings and actually has to spend an action casting it. When GM does this, he forgets to move it afterwards, leaving Varian unmolested for a precious 6-second span. With the shadows all destroyed, Varian contemplates dispelling his own oak body so he could maneuver better, but at this rate he fears he might not get another chance like this. He spends the whole round regaining his psionic focus, a resource which he needs to power his psionic spell penetration feats, drastically increasing his chance of affecting the Nightwing with a spell. Seeing this, the Nightwing swoops in on Varian, who backs off again, desperately taking cover around a corner of the ever-present magical elephant.
I could swear you're trying to avoid the cleric. I can't heal you if you keep running away.
You also can't heal me if it full attacks and kills me.
Fine. The cleric will just double move this way. Varian, if you can just move 10 feet over this way and stay there, then he can heal you.
Varian ponders a moment, carefully calculating his oak body reduced movement, knowing he can't afford to remain that close to the Nightwing, and desperately looking for an opening to try his disintegration spell for the 3rd time.
Could you have him do a run move instead? As long as it's a straight line, he could go triple instead of double his movement. But he loses dex bonus for a round.
Sweet. That's what he'll do.
You can't. We got rid of the run move some time ago.
Running is not allowed?
It's been that way for a while. When was this?
Actually, now that you mention it, I seem to remember running being banned. It happened during some conversation about overland travel.
So everyone just moves at the same constant speed. Double move and that's it? You know what this reminds me of? That one version of Warhammer 40k where the Space Marines and Gene Stealers moved at the same speed. I move 6 inches, you move 6 inches.
Yeah, and because everything moved at exactly the same speed, the melee Gene Stealers moved up 6 inches trying to get close into reach, and Space Marines, with their ranged weapons, moved back the exact same distance and shot them.
I think 40k fixed that rules issue pretty quick.
Meanwhile, GM's trying to break those rules in D&D.
Varian tries to disintegrate the Nightwing, but fails, missing the ranged touch attack. Possibly because he was trying to shoot around the corner of an artificial elephant. Meanwhile, despite its relatively poor to hit bonus and meager 1 attack per round, Stampy deals 2d8 plus 15 damage per hit, meaning that after the Nightwing's damage reduction, the elephant's hits inflict a straight 2d8 damage, since the monstrosity was ignoring the summoned creature, thirsty for the blood of player characters. Over the course of the battle, the statue-turned elephant actually proved to be the most consistent source of damage. Donner, the NPC cleric, finally catches up with Varian and tries to heal him, but fails his check to cast on the defensive, thus wasting the rare opportunity. The Scion desperately buffs himself with temporary hit points and continues trying to flee the much more maneuverable monster. Finally, Balkoth convinces Omit to +5 his silver weapon again, and Balkoth and Azeron manage to finish off the Nightwing as it senses Varian's weakness and overextends itself trying to kill him.
I was so close, Varian.
Amazing. You went full out to kill Varian, and yet Azeron survived.
Somehow. Yeah, how much gold worth of wand did you spend on that fight, Omit?
Let's not get bogged down in specifics. Back on the carpet.
And how much gold worth of magic will Omid spend to win the next battle?
Find out next time on the NERF Wars. Please like and subscribe for more Don't Try This at Home antagonistic D&D. I also make a fully animated D&D campaign called Sea of Secrets, which you can watch right now. And there's no way I could keep that up without my generous patrons.